The subject of today's topic is PDF markup, and it's actually a little bit more than that because PDF markup is, as you'll see, closely tied to both issues and forms. My name is Dave Sheeran. I'm a senior application engineer with the ProjectWise group based in Toronto, and I welcome you all to today's session. Before we get into the session, so what is PDF markup? So PDF markup allows the ability of multiple users to simultaneously review and mark up PDF documents. And when I say simultaneously, I think that's an important aspect of it. Two people can, or three people can be working on the same PDF at the same time, and all of their comments will be coming together. So if I'm working on it and my colleague Mark is working on it, I'll see his comments pretty much real time as he's doing his markups. But beyond just the markup tools of the PDF, we also have the ability to create issues as part of the PDF. And so the important part about issues is that all of the information there is trackable and reportable. Because if you've ever created an issue, and there's numerous ways we can create issues within the ProjectWise 365 services, one of them being through PDF markup, is that when you create an issue, it opens up a form, and the data that is within that form is all trackable. And as we'll see a little bit later this morning, that you can also report on that through the issues service. PDF markup can be accessed numerous ways. Today, we're going to access it through the ProjectWise web connections as part of the 365 services. But in addition, you could also access that through Share or as part of a review in deliverables management. And I'll just mention that today within deliverables management, it doesn't support the creation of issues as part of that review process, but that will be coming in the future. So today we're going to access PDF markup via ProjectWise web connections. And for those of you already using ProjectWise projects, then you're familiar with the service itself, but it can be accessed once you log into connect.bentley.com and you go to your project, you will see those services down below. And if you go into ProjectWise web connections, that will then take you into the work areas that have been shared for your project. So when I go into ProjectWise web connections and I drill down to the folder or work area that I'm working on, I can just click on a PDF, and the default behavior when I click on that PDF will be to launch the PDF markup service. If I were to select the PDF with the little arrow on the left, then you've got numerous other options that you may be familiar with, being able to create a new version, put it through a workflow, download it, and so on. But the behavior just to click on it will be to open up the PDF markup capabilities. When you do open it up, you will see the set of tools that you're looking at here in this screenshot. So up in the upper left, and we'll cover these in some detail this morning, there are various tools that you'll see for navigating. So zooming in, zooming out, panning, window area, being able to adjust the layout, see other PDFs within the same folder. That all exists over here on the left side of the page. And then on the right side of the page, there are numerous tools for placing different geometries as part of your markup, maybe placing a line, placing a shape, placing text, a call-out button, a signature, stamp, those sorts of things. Those are all available here to the right. And at the same time, this little flag within a circle allows me to create issues. So in addition to just doing a standard markup or red line, if you want to refer to it as that, you can create an issue, and those issues will be linked to a form that is reportable that I'll speak to when we get into the demo now. So I'll just minimize the PowerPoint now for a couple of minutes. We'll come back to that towards the end to summarize. But so I've now logged into my ProjectWise project. And I'm logged in here as David Sheeran, who works for Bentley.com. I can see that information here. And I'm going to go in first into ProjectWise Web Connections. where the administrator for this project has set up connections to various work areas within ProjectWise. And I'm going to look at a particular folder here. This is a folder in my Project Humber extension. I've got several PDFs in here. I've already been marking up this PDF. Those markups and anyone else's markups will get stored into this .xfdf file or overlay file. But if I select on that PDF, as I mentioned in the opening slides, the default behavior will be to load that document into the PDF markup viewer. So when I do that, here's the navigational tools I was speaking to up in the upper left. So for instance, most of them I think are pretty self-explanatory, but I click on the zoom in, that zooms me into the screen. I can window area, so I select an area and window into that specific region. The hand on the left allows me to pan on the screen. I can use the select button to select on things. If we want to open up this panel, this gives me a few different options in here. If I were on a multi-page PDF, I could have a thumbnail view. I have a thumbnail view for my single image here or my single PDF, but if I had multiple ones, I would see the different images down here on the left. As well, I can open up this Outlines tab, and in the Outlines tab, I can see, for instance, the references that were used to create this PDF. And it's able to track that information because this PDF was created inside of ProjectWise, where the original CAD file had references or XREFs attached to it. At the same time, I could also look at other PDFs that might exist within my folder within my ProjectWise work area. So in this example, it's saying, okay, it sees two other PDFs, and if we just tab back to the web connections, these are these other PDFs you see here. So without having to go back to this page and select on it, I could simply click on them, and that will take me directly into that PDF. And I can just close that box by clicking on it again. So let's look now over on the right. If we look at some of the markup tools that exist, I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory, but let's just go through them here. So first of all, I've got this pen or pencil freehand. If I just hit the down arrow on that, you'll see it'll give me a selection of several colors to choose from. So I could pick a green pen, blue pen, and so on. But if I further want to expand that, I can choose from numerous colors. I can also adjust the opacity of the line, which really is just the opposite of transparency. So for instance, if I make the opacity at 0 or 1%, then that means that's going to be 100% transparent when I draw that line. Opacity isn't really that important when I'm drawing a line, but as you'll see, if I want to place a stamp or a symbol, then it can be quite useful to make it semi-transparent to see what's going on underneath. At the same time, you'll see I can also adjust the thickness here. So if I were to just go and start drawing freehand, that's what the freehand tool allows me to do, to go and draw something on the page. Now, I did mention it's multi-user access. So if right now, as I mentioned, I'm in Microsoft Chrome or in Google Chrome right now. I'm logged in as David Sheeran. Let's just minimize that for a moment. And over here in another browser, I'm logged in as a user who works for a company called Mainline. And that happens to be david.sheeran@mainline.com. I just made it Dave, so it's a little bit easier to understand who's doing the work here. But what we can do is, if I want to go in and do some kind of a markup here, I can go and mark the same thing. I'll use a green line. And when I go in and I add any changes, and I probably haven't logged in here, but it's saving that. So I noticed I probably need to refresh that. But you'll notice over here, I will see those changes immediately within that same PDF file. So pretty much real time, two people can be marking up at the same time, and you're going to see their changes right away. And if you're interested in knowing who else is working on it, I can actually click over here, and it's telling me that there are two people currently working on this. And if I open that up, I can see there's David Sheeran at Bentley.com and Dave Sheeran at Mainline. They're both working on this PDF document at this point in time. I can modify or remove any of my own markups. So that's the line that David just put on there, but I can't do anything about what Dave has done. So you can modify obviously your own markups, but you can't change others' markups within the markup tools. Some of the other things we can look at as we go across the top, there's numerous geometries here that we can place on the PDF. So, you know, I could go in, I could draw a box, I could draw a circle, an arrow, and so on. There's a signature tool within here. So if I wanted to sign on something, I could go in and write a signature. I could save that, so that if I wanted it as my default signature that I could use over and over, I could just save that, or I could make it a one-time signature. And then when I do that, it's just sitting on the end of my cursor. I can place it somewhere, I can resize it, I can move it down into the title block if that made sense, and so on. There's also the ability, of course, to place text in here. So if I wanted to place text within an area, I could say place text, and I can go ahead and type something in. There's a call out box. So if I wanted to go in, create a call out, and again, I could type some text in there as part of that call out. And then if you go into the miscellaneous tools, we have this option to place a stamp on the image itself. So a stamp is really just any image file that you have stored locally on your hard drive or on the network that you can access. So a stamp, for instance, if I want to go in, I'll just click in the view, and that will activate the ability for me to select a stamp from my desktop. Here I've got, for instance, a number of stamps. So I could go in, I've got one, an approved stamp. I'll go ahead and I'll place that on my PDF, and if I wanted to, I could resize that. It's a little big for this particular size PDF. I could resize it. You know, I could have my signature go in there as part of that PDF. And you'll notice this is useful where the transparency has come in here. You can see the transparency. I had it set fairly low, and the usefulness of that is that if I go in here and let's cancel that. I'll move to another tool. Okay, we'll just select that. You'll see as I move over another object, because it's semi-transparent, it's able to see right through that object. Now, beyond just having a stamp that might say approved, that maybe a document controller might do when they're reviewing a document, you could really have any image as part of those image stamps. So if I go back to my stamp, and maybe here, for instance, this is a P&ID drawing, I might realize that, oh, there should have been a valve at this location. So what I could do is I could have an image of that valve that I could place, for instance, as part of my markup. So the stamp itself doesn't necessarily have to be an approval or anything like that. It could just be any image that you want to place on the drawing as part of your markup. And again, I can resize that. In this case, it's semi-transparent, which is quite useful because I can see the information underneath. Now, also as part of the PDF markup, as I mentioned, the capabilities allow me to create issues. And we can create issues numerous ways. We can do it here through PDF markup. We can do it as part of design review. We can also create issues on our mobile devices through Edge Mobile. But the idea is, if I want to create an issue, you know, that's what this little button is with the circle and the flag inside. It says one-click issue, and these are numerous issues that I've already placed on this drawing, which we can look at in a moment. But if I want to place an issue on here, I would select a location on the drawing, and then it's going to pop up a form. So you can decide what forms are available. We deliver numerous forms for you to use, and those can be modified, or you can start from scratch and create your own form. So for the PDF markup here, I've made available 2 different forms that can be used. So I have this closeout category, and in there I've got a form called punch list, and I have a communication category, and I've got one called structural issue. If I pick that second form, this is one I created yesterday afternoon. They're quite straightforward. This is actually what you get out of the box if you just create a new form within this category. It gives you all of these fields that I can change. So right now I haven't actually modified anything to it. So for instance, if you go to assign to, it's going to grab the list of users on the project. But things like status, right now I haven't put in a status field. It's just set to sample. So what we'll do is let's go into forms for a couple of minutes and just give you a quick overview of how you can work with these forms and create these forms. So I'm going to go ahead and temporarily, I'm just going to close out of my PDF, and I'm going to go back to my project where I see all of my 365 services, and I'm going to go into the form service. This is where we can modify existing forms and add new forms. When I do that, if I want to look at my forms, I go to the upper right here on design forms, and I hit the little gear or settings dialog, and that will expose all of the forms that are available to me as part of this project. When you are working with forms that you're going to use in the PDF markup as part of an issue, any forms that are in the approved state means they're available to be viewed. So any of these others, these are both in the draft state. I won't see those when I'm doing a PDF markup and I create an issue. I'm only, for instance, in this category or group of design review, which is kind of what I'm doing right now, I'm only going to see this one form approved. Now, right now I don't have the ability to edit it, but if I set that to draft mode, you'll notice that the little pencil button gets enabled, and that allows me to edit that form. So first thing I do is I go into the settings of forms. That brings up all of my forms. I set that to draft mode, and then I hit the edit button. When I hit the edit button, then I see the form's layout. So along the left, you're going to see numerous controls that you can place on the form. Most of these, I think, are pretty self-explanatory, things like labels and paragraphs, text areas, timestamps. There are things like a weather control, and the weather control can be quite useful, for instance, in a field type environment where I'm on a construction site as an example, and I might be doing a daily report, or maybe I'm doing meeting minutes. And the weather control knows if you've defined for your project the latitude and longitude, it can actually grab today's weather from the internet and place it as part of that control. But you'll see there are other forms down here, grids and regions and sections. But let's just place a couple and show you how the tool itself works. So first thing I might want to do with this form is I'd want to place an image on it. So I can go and I'll place an image at the top. You'll want to pay attention if you do test out the form service. Down below, there's information, useful information that's constantly provided. So in this case, as soon as I put that image on there, I got a couple of warnings, and I can select on that tab to open it up and see what it's saying to me. But it's telling me two things. First of all, when I put that image control onto the canvas here, it pushed everything else down. And so now it's saying controls outside the visible boundaries of the region and suggesting that I want to fix that. And the other warning is just saying, okay, I've got a control, but there's no image related to that control. So that's fine. So let's go ahead and let's fix those two warnings. So whenever you select on one of these controls in your form, over on the right, you'll notice there's information about whatever it has been selected. So in this case, I can see the properties of that. I can see styles, which tells me, for instance, things about the width and the height and the layout. Similarly, if I move down, you'll see if I click on subject, it gives me a different control. And what's good to be aware of is most of these, if they have a label, then there's actually two places you can select. So here I've selected the label for this particular control, and here I've selected the area that gets filled in, and you'll notice that there are two different possibilities for each of those as I go down the list. So let's go to our image now, and I could go in and I could select an image. So maybe we'll go ahead and we'll pick the Bentley logo, and I'll go ahead and I'll save that. When I do that, down below, it's giving me a little bit more detail about that. So in this case, I don't get a warning. I just get some information, and it says, oh, the height of 28 pixels is below the recommended height. This could result in a poorly rendered form. Okay, that's fine. So what we can do is we'll go ahead and we'll will increase the size of that logo. I've gone ahead and I've done that. And that's got rid of the information, so it's saying that's an acceptable size for viewing. But the warning has come up, and I know what the warning is without looking at it. It's telling me that my little close button is now off the page again. So rather than moving that, maybe what I might do is I might shrink down the size of my description field. Right now it's over here on the right, it's set to 300 pixels. Why don't we go and make that 200 pixels? And now I can see everything that's on the form. My warning goes away. So as part of PDF Markup, to recap up until now, we've gone in, I talked about issues in PDF Markup, and now I'm talking about when we create an issue, how we can have forms that track all the data as part of that issue. So what I'm going to do now is maybe one other thing we could change is the status field. You'll notice when I created that form, it was just set to sample. So if I pick on the actual field that gets selected from over here and I go to the properties, what I can do is I can edit the list that exists within there. So I could add some items in here, and maybe the status of my form, I want to add open, unresolved, and closed as an example. And maybe we'll remove that little sample one and save that. So now I have a pick list with 3 values. Some of these controls can automatically capture information. So like I mentioned in the assign to field, in this case, it's going to capture people's names in the project, and I can assign this to different folks on the project. Now, what's nice at any time as I'm working on this form is I can preview that form. And what's great about that is it means I don't have to save it, go out, test it, see how it works, and then come back here and make a modification. I can preview it right within the layout. Now, this is not an exact science. It's going to look different depending on the size of your tablet, but we have some general parameters around these that tell you what would a large tablet look like, what might a phone look like, what could a small tablet look like. You can toggle between these. And then you can also toggle between landscape and portrait. So if you want to see it on a preview what that form is going to look like through the various devices and layouts. So if I'm happy with my form, which I am, I've added an image, I shrunk down the size of the description, and I added some values to my status column. I'm just going to go exit out of the Forms Designer now. And if I want to make this available to people doing the PDF markup, I'll need to set that back to approved. So now I've set that back to approved, and I'm just going to close out of my, well, we can leave that open, but we'll come back to our ProjectWise web connections now, and I'm going to reopen that PDF that I was marking up a few minutes ago. So when we get back into our PDF now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to place a one-click issue here, and we'll go ahead and I'm going to place that as I did earlier. I'm going to pick the form that I was working on, which is this structural issue form. And you'll notice now that I see those updates automatically. As soon as I made those changes and switched it from draft to approved back in the Forms Designer, all those changes are now available. So I could then go in and type the subject. So maybe I'll say there's a design problem. I'm going to say that to do next Wednesday. The status of it is currently, I'm going to say open, and then I'm going to assign that to someone on the project. So I'll go ahead and I'll assign that to my colleague Mark, for instance. And if I want, I could put something in the description field. Maybe are these the correct sizes, as an example. And then I can go ahead and I can publish that that issue. Now, if we wanted to see what's gone on as part of this PDF, if we go over here to this notes section, I can basically get an audit trail of everything that has happened to this PDF since one or more people were marking it up. So I can see everyone's markups within here. I can select on those objects to see what they are. So this was Dave on the 13th of April, yesterday, did something, and then David here made an issue. And if I select on that, that's going to open up the form with whatever issue I have placed on there. Now, as I mentioned with the issues themselves, all of that information is trackable and reportable. So if we want to have a look at what that looks like, we can go into our issues service. So here I'm going to come back to my project, and I'm going to go back to the landing page for my project, and I'm going to go into issues resolution. And when I go into issues resolution, I get this configurable dashboard that has been created for the various property groups. And those property groups, in my case, the structural issue I was working at is part of this design review property group. So I'm looking at all of the issues that were created against the numerous PDFs here within this dashboard. I can unlock this and add more widgets to this dashboard. I could add a map, I could add another bar graph, but I can also do quite a bit just with the ones that I've already configured on here, just by selecting on things. So we can create filters as part of any of these widgets. So for instance, I might only be interested, right now I'm looking at what's been which of the issues have been assigned to which individuals. So Dan, Dave, Mark, and David all have been assigned issues. I might alternatively wanted to see when was the date that these various issues were created. And if I wanted to isolate a particular one, I could select on it. So for instance, when I go back to assign to, maybe I'm only interested in what's been assigned to me. I can select on my name, or I can select on my name in the radial chart, and that will create a filter that you can see up here. So it's now filtering down below the 3 issues that currently have been assigned to myself. And at any time I could turn off those issues. Similarly, there are numerous PDFs here that have been marked up. In the linked items, if I only wanted to see what issues are linked to a particular PDF, so the structural PDF, I can select on it, that creates a filter, and now I'm only looking at issues related to that specific PDF. And again, I can just turn that off at any time. So I have this dynamic reporting that's available as part of the dashboard, but then at the same time, I could also export this. So for instance, if I wanted to take all of the issues here related to the numerous PDFs, I could come over here to the right and I could say, let's go ahead and we're going to download that as a CSV file. In which case, maybe I want to use this data externally in another application, some other reporting tool that I have. But I've been able to capture all of the information on those various forms and pull it into a spreadsheet. So with that, I'm going to come back to my slides and just summarize, and then we can see, we can open it up to see if there are any questions. Let me just go back to my slideshow. So to summarize the PDF review and markup features, they give users the ability to consolidate all comments and markups into one location. And as we showed, we can have multiple users marking up those PDFs simultaneously, which is a great feature. And it's pretty much real time in terms of those changes. As they get saved, I get to see them automatically. I don't typically even need to refresh my browser. At the same time, we can also create issues as part of the PDF markup tools. And again, just to summarize, issues pop up a configurable form that is trackable and reportable. So if I want to report on the data around any of those issues, I can view it all through that dashboard, or I can export it to another tool of my choice. My last slide is really just one possible workflow that you could use as part of the overall process. What I've been talking about today is really just the tools within PDF Markup, but that's used typically as part of a workflow or a process. And that process could be to use the renditioning capabilities of ProjectWise, where we can generate PDFs based on a schedule, or we can do it on the fly, or based on state changes and so on. But the idea is we can generate those PDFs. We can then use the PDF markup tools that I've been speaking about today to review and mark that up for multiple users. And then, of course, we can use ProjectWise workflows to put that through a QA and QC process, where the reviews themselves can go through different state changes, and within those state changes, we can have security. So maybe I do my markups, I do my review, I push it to the next state, it becomes read-only to me. My colleague Mark goes in and he looks at it and so on. So with that, I'm going to just open it up for questions.